Because here in the subtropics, you do things a little bit different, right? And that's what I wanted to cover today, because some of those challenges, they can really mess you up, where you think that you're a really bad gardener. But you're not. You're just trying to do things the way that the Northerners do. So what we're going to cover today is 6 spring gardening tips for your Florida vegetable garden. So when it comes to gardening tip number 1, it's all about right plant for the right time of year. Now, for a lot of people, when they think about early spring vegetable gardening, they're thinking about things like onions and garlic and, of course, lettuce. But for us here in the subtropics in Florida, well, we're really kind of at the end of that season. So I'm really excited about all the production I've had. I mean, we've had so many pounds of lettuce back here, and I'm really excited to figure out, when do I harvest this garlic and onions? Because I'm kind of newer to growing those things. But I have had tons and tons of lettuce all throughout the winter. But we're kind of heading towards the end of it. I mean, you can see some of these ones. Yeah. And while there are some breeds of lettuce that we could grow through early spring, it's just really not the ideal season, because we're really moving into our warm weather crops. So the first tip is make sure that you're doing warm weather crops now. Things like peppers. And I even did some things where I did start some peppers early in the winter, and I just hid them between the lettuce because they do not like the cold, right? They are native to the Caribbean region, to the Gulf region, so they really do not want to be in those 40s and 50s on any length of time. But I live in zone 10, so I kind of pushed it, which is okay. And if you're looking for more ideas, I just put out a video on 5 spring crops that you could grow in your Florida vegetable garden. And one of the other warm weather crops, I don't think I talked about it in the video, is eggplant. Eggplant is a warm weather crop. It's also part of the nightshade family, just like our peppers. We've already gotten pounds of eggplant. We did a really cool Greek dish where we use fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, which were not in season, obviously bought from the store. But we were able to use some of our own eggplants. It was so good. And I've been really excited because I remember talking to some of you all in the fall. We were getting lots of flowers, and I think you all were having the same thing too, not getting eggplants. But as soon as it warmed up again, the plant took off and we got flowers and lots of eggplants. So spring gardening tip number 2 really has to do with understanding the weather at this time of year. Yes, we aren't in the high heat of the summer, but we're also not in the rainy season like we were in the summer. So what ends up happening throughout the spring here in Florida is we go from being in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, up into the 80s and 90s, but we don't have the cloud cover from all those huge monsoon-like rainstorms. So what we have to deal with is a lot of evaporation and soil that starts getting really dry. Actually, so much so, April is one of the driest months of the year for the state of Florida. And fun fact, the number 1 reason we call for a state of emergency is usually in the month of April, not from hurricanes, but actually from wildfires. So knowing that, one of the things we want to make sure we're doing is paying attention to how dry the soil is getting, and knowing that we need to water more often because it's 1, drier, and 2, there is not the rainstorms, but you've got the heat pulling the moisture out of the soil. And because we're dealing with the challenge that soil is getting drier faster, you're going to want to have plants that have deeper root systems. Things like lettuces are going to start heading out, not just because of the heat, but also because they have a shallower root system. So things like beans and tomatoes are going to have a better chance of establishing really good root systems. But until they do that, you're going to have to water them more often, whether it's sprinklers, hoses, or watering cans. You need to make sure that they're establishing their roots so that they can access it when the sun starts to dry out your soil. Spring gardening tip number 3. Kind of along the same line of the fact that we've got those drier days, we want to make sure that when we do water, it's just not enough to get the soil on top wet. We need to help those plants that are new establish deep root systems. And the way we do it is by watering them longer. You want to do 20 to 30 minutes early in the morning or late in the evening to make sure that they can go down and access the water. Things like my sunflowers here or sweet potatoes are going to be reaching deep down into the soil to make sure they can continue to maintain access. But the cool thing is that if they're established already, like these sweet potatoes, which started, I think late summer last year, they're doing great. So even the ones back here, they're struggling a little bit because we harvested them so much through the summer. But these ones, well, they're already starting to flower, which is something a lot of northerners don't ever get to see because they don't have the warm days and the sun to make sure that they start opening up blossoms. And as the bees start coming out throughout spring, they love going to these flowers. I'm really excited. Wow, there's like a lot of flowers this year. Spring gardening tip number 4. So that sun is coming down and it is going to be hot, and if plants are not well protected, one of the other things you can do to help slow down that evaporation is by having a mulch. So just like I have here on my green onions, which definitely needs some pruning. I think we're going to make green onion soup this week, so it's a good time for them to get pruned. The mulch in there is going to help prevent the soil from evaporating as quickly. It's the same thing that I'm doing over here until the sweet potatoes establish themselves. So having things like a good mulch that breaks down and can also act like a fertilizer is really important when it comes to spring. And you have a couple options. You could do something like a woody mulch like this, which will really help build up, your carbon material, some nice organic material for your plants to go and eat. But you can also do something like sweet potatoes can also be a living mulch, kind of having the same purpose. It's going to shade out that sunny area, and because sweet potatoes are a tropical plant, they do not mind being in the 80s and 90s because, well, they're from the tropics. But they have to have a really well-established root system so that they can access the water that's lower down to make sure that they can keep those leaves happy. So when it comes to spring gardening tip number 5, so plants like this broccoli and cauliflower, well, they're coming towards the end of their season because they're a cool weather crop, which is great because we got a lot of harvest out of these. I think we already got 10 pounds of broccoli so far this year, which is amazing. And we're kind of trying to use them to help us get going on our next crop that's going to be in this area, which is peppers. So by establishing young little peppers right below, I started these as little starts in a tray, and now I've added them below here. They have a chance to go get their deep root systems when we water well down below, but they don't have to take the full brunt of the sun because the broccoli is helping shade them out. And we've done a similar thing even with the green onions, as the green onions are actually growing up and through. Well, I still get broccoli heads. And I'm really excited for this. This is my first year with broccoli. And we got a lot. And I'm getting my very first cauliflower in. So I'm really excited for that too. And then when it comes to spring gardening tip number 6, well, number 6 is about really understanding our sunshine hours. So most vegetable gardens up north are gonna want 6, 8, 10 hours of full sun, depending on how far north they go. But here in Florida, we only wanna be at 4 to 6 hours. Now, one of the things you gotta understand is that how many hours of sun do we get? Up in those northern climates, they're actually gonna get longer days than we will in the summer because we don't actually get some of the same swing. We get about 9 to 10 sunshine hours every day in the spring months. So plants that are really well designed for this, because we're kind of moving into more of a tropical feel, even though it's a little bit on the dry end, things like bananas will do well even in spring, especially if they're really well established, because these guys love a lot of water. But they're able to still produce great things like the sprack, which is looking really, really close to being ready. If you guys remember this from all summer, it was just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting to go, and it warmed up, and you can see it's already starting to get a little bit of a light yellow blush to it. So we're going to be getting ready to harvest that in the next few weeks. I'm really excited about that. And one of our big producers through late winter into early spring has already been the papaya. The goal for this year was to get up to 50 pounds of papaya, and we're not even done yet. And we just hit 49 pounds the other day. And we still have more to go. And I've got 2 more papaya plants. So having these really well-established perennials is really great because we're gonna get so many pounds of food. I think we've already hit 80 pounds of food so far this year, and we haven't even finished up 3 months. And if you're looking for more help on how to stay on track, go ahead and pick up your free seasonal gardening calendar at wildfloridian.net/calendar. Link will be in the description below. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.